Hey, thanks for joining us back on episode 11 of the Leading Adam podcast. Today is a very special milestone episode because we have our very first guest. Sarah Spangler is joining us today to talk a little bit about the origin story behind 240 Solutions, how it got started, how human experience became a thing. And we are very excited to talk with her, so stay tuned.
The Leading Adam podcast is hosted by me, Adam Binkerd. I've spent the last 10 years researching how a healthy human experience is the key to innovation and student retention in education. And now I'm taking to the mic to share what I've learned. Hear how I've defied the odds and transformed from a landscaper to a national expert in student success in less than 10 years. Not an educator? That's okay. Stay tuned for entertaining stories and practical takeaways about leading self, leading leaders, and leading culture. The Leading Adam podcast is co-hosted by Erika Crabtree, produced by Chris Spangler, and sponsored by 240 Solutions. Connect with us at 240solutions.com, and I hope you'll stay tuned because together we can change the world.
Milestone episode of Leading Adam.
It is a milestone. We are officially 3/4 of the way through season 1 with this special series we're going to do. We got a 2-part series with a special guest, which we'll get to. But yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, awesome. And speaking of special guest, who is this extra person with us today?
It's me.
It's the one.
Well, that's all we need to say about that.
And done. The one, the only, Sarah Spangler.
Yeah,
right.
I can't tell you, Erika, how stoked I've been about this
Yes.
episode for a couple reasons, and we'll get into all of that. But Sarah's just been such an integral part of understanding the human experience. What does it mean to interpret that? How do we lead? How do we participate in a team with that? And so that's going to be really fun this time to reminisce a little bit, but then also talk a little bit about the future.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And I would not be working in higher education if it wasn't for Sarah.
Wow.
So we go back.
This is going to get
far.
like that, huh?
I know. So
I love that.
You're very, very special. Special guest. So it makes sense you're the first guest.
Yeah.
Nice. And we can tell embarrassing stories about each other too, right? That's what I came prepared for.
You can tell all you want. We know the editor.
That's right. That's right.
That's true. You got the inside.
Yeah.
I wanted to though share some feedback that we've been getting. You know, we've got as of today 4 episodes out to the public, and we're getting some good feedback. So I wanted to share some of that with you. I know I have not shared this with either one of you.
Oh gosh, I'm so nervous.
Yeah, so you're really going to like this first one, Erika. Okay, so it says, and I'm not going to share who said what. It will just read them for what they are. This one received today, actually. Your podcast is really good. Erika's voice is perfect.
Wow.
Oh my, perfect work.
Okay.
Oh gosh. It's all downhill from here. Grateful for that. Thank you.
This one I absolutely love. I'm not an educator, but I'm learning a lot about leading that I had not yet considered. I really like that one. You know, we focus a lot towards educators and those leading in education because it's what we're passionate about. But to hear that one means that people are really deriving the real leadership lessons. You know, you take student outcomes, student success, and replace it with customer satisfaction, replace it with product development, whatever the case may be.
Right.
And there you go. So this person is doing that. Couple more. There's always a nugget that introduces a perspective I needed to hear.
Oh,
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. We were pretty committed to the practical. Hopefully that's what they meant. Who knows?
I'll take it.
This one's good. 2 more. I'm not in a leadership role, but I listen because it's challenging me personally.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Isn't that awesome?
Yes.
You know, I think it was episode 3 maybe that we talked. The challenge was look in the mirror, right? And kind of self-assess. What are you feeling? And then assume people are feeling that. Maybe that's part of that. So.
It could be the ballet too. I know that really struck me. I was inspired by your ballet, Erika.
Oh, how many classes have you taken since you heard that?
Not any yet. I've been thinking about it though.
That's
the
good.
first
That's
step.
progress, right?
It's a good start. One more, right? And then we'll move on. This one probably most near and dear to my heart. Keep sharing your findings because your message needs to be heard.
Yes.
That comes from an educator, and I really appreciate that. And I think it comes at a right time. This journey, not just podcasting necessarily, but being an entrepreneur and trying to make a difference in the world, it's discouraging. And sometimes it's like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Is this really, does this matter? And then to receive feedback like that at the right time is just a little bit of fuel to kind of get maybe hopefully to the next gas station.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So grateful. So thank you for all of you who have left feedback so far, and keep it coming. Let us know what you think about each episode. And we haven't really plugged this as much yet, but if you have ideas for topics you'd like to hear in future episodes, or if you're an educator or a leader who resonates with this message and would like to be a guest, please reach out to us, drop us a comment, and we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I would love to be answering some questions.
Absolutely.
Scenario-based questions too, right?
Yeah.
How I'm up against this. What do I do? How do I consider the humanity in this? That would be awesome.
Yeah.
But today, we get the opportunity to kind of reminisce some and have some fun. And but then really we're gonna talk in part 2 kind of about professional development and how do you use human-centered philosophies around that and why and so that's going to be really good, but it's
awesome. Well, yeah, and I'm excited about this because so we've talked about what human experience is and what that means. And I think this gives us an opportunity to really get back to the origins of how this whole philosophy was developed. And so I am just anxious to dive in and hear the story of how, take us back to the beginning.
It's probably worth noting, Erika. I don't know that, we introduced Sarah, but I don't know that we've said explicitly in any episode that really, Sarah's the co-creator of this philosophy. In a lot of ways, the co-founder of 240 Solutions. But yeah, all of this, what we've been talking about, belonging, vulnerability, shared purpose, the human experience, all of that came from a lot of interesting work that Sarah was involved in. So that is why you say, the origins, why talk origins with Sarah? Well, that's why, because she's the OG.
And tell us, Sarah, we're going to let you speak, I promise.
It's all right. I'm really chilling. It's great.
I'm just anxious to share with the audience here who are you? Tell us a little bit about your background and what your role is now. What do you do now?
Okay. Yeah, sure. So I wouldn't go back to the day I was born. So I'll go just a few years after that. We all work together in a different life, right? And that's where this relationship began. And I'm sure we're going to go over a lot of that, the origin story here in a little bit. But over the course of many years of doing this work with both of you and others, eventually it has led me and my family to move across the country for all sorts of different reasons. But because of the connections that I was able to make doing the work with 240, there was one of my clients that lives there in Phoenix as well that hired me on full time to do this kind of work for them. So it was taking this kind of consulting outside work and going in to an organization and becoming one of them and creating some things within their culture. So a really fun new experience and learning things, trying things, failing at some things, succeeding at a few things as well. But it's been a really cool journey and really fun to be back here with you guys to kind of revisit where this all started.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we realize, over the years that we all work together, that it's definitely more of a bent towards entrepreneurship.
Sure.
And that's probably the thing that maybe excites me most about getting to watch you do what you're doing now, is because now we had that experience that you take that consulting side, which is kind of the external, the third party. And how do you live that out in an organization? And, I get the privilege of still being contracted by them and getting to a kind of a front row seat to it. And it's been awesome to watch. So I can't wait to later talk about what you're doing.
It is interesting that you say entrepreneurship. I just want to pause there for a second, because it is very different to be an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur. And if anyone out there is thinking, I think I'm an entrepreneur, maybe you are, but maybe what you really need to do is be in a system, in a structure, making change and creating new things and being innovative. And that is different than starting something from scratch, where you have to do all the business and all the money and all the hiring and all the firing and all those things. Like they're two different birds completely, and you might be made for one and not the other. That's definitely one of the things I've learned about myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when I think back to our time together working for an institution, that entrepreneur word came to my mind too, as I was just thinking about and getting excited about this episode. I mentioned on one of our prior episodes that, one of the really fun things that I really enjoyed and something about, leading change in an organization or finding changes, finding those change agents, those people that are like-minded and want to see change happen. And I think, like, for me, that was where, I got that foot in the door. I was enjoying my role, but I kept thinking of these things that could be better, things that could be different. And then having, you to talk to on a regular basis, and literally the office right next door to me. And then meeting Adam for the first time and realizing, oh, this guy gets it. He was that student that I get to work with every day. That was so exciting, and being able to continue those conversations. And so I'm just curious, like, if you guys could share a little bit about where your perspective and where you guys were individually before, at that moment where you came together and started.
Yeah. So I'll start that story, because I was at the university in this capacity about a year before Adam joined the team. And so I joined this organization, and my natural bent is to solve problems and use my resources, connect with people, do all the things. And so when you're working directly with students and you have that bent, what are you going to do? You're going to hear from a student, and you're going to hear that they need something or they have a question about something, and you're going to go after it, right? You're going to start making phone calls and the emails and digging and doing all these things. Well, I learned pretty quickly that that's just not how this organization worked, and that it was more of a policy, follow this process, follow this procedure. And maybe I was pushing the limits a little bit and thinking outside the box a little bit more than what was comfortable. And that's okay. There's nothing evil about that. There's companies that go, there's a process to follow, and there's nothing evil about that. But sometimes it's like square peg, round hole, right? So for me, it was, I don't know if I fit here. I'm not sure if my ways are their ways. And so you kind of struggle through that a little bit and start to realize you're becoming a little bit of a troublemaker, maybe in some ways. You're not sure why. And so that's where I was at. And so about a year into this role, in walks this new hire, really kind of a different part of the state, but still in my team, and that was Adam. And suddenly, I think, and you can probably explain this better than I can, I realized that he also was maybe a little square peg, round hole situation. And when you find comrades, right? And Erika, same thing. Like the more like about that same time, Adam came on was when Erika came on to actually take my role, and I moved into a different one. So we worked really closely together. And so you find these people who also kind of don't fit the status quo, and you start to, kind of lock arms together and like, how can we do this without being trouble? And I think that's where we kind of started trying to figure out what is our next move. What's your perspective on how all that went down?
No, that's pretty accurate. I when I started in the role, which was coordinating student success efforts across the institution, one person, 10,000 plus students. And I didn't really know anything about student success. What I knew is what worked for me. And that passion was what drove me. And I didn't want those Adam Binkerds out there to slip through the cracks. And so, you hear different when you're kind of in that spot, and having conversations, trying to just gather context. I had been there just over a month, I think, when I met you, because like you said, you were at a different part of the state, both of you. Mm-hmm. And I had spent about a month just asking questions, why this? What about that? And trying to understand, like, when a student gets into academic probation, or what does it look like when they onboard? And people just bristle when you ask why this or why that. And so in a very, very short amount of time, I realized I'm not going to be super popular here because I wanted to understand it, because I do believe that I possessed enough passion to be effective. And so very similarly, when we're sitting in the meeting, I happened to be traveling with who was the head of advising then, and meeting more advisors across the state. Sarah certainly stood out as one who just thought differently. We didn't have a conversation. We barely talked, really. But you get it. Like, you pick up on it. Mm-hmm. And you and I started talking more. And then eventually, I remember I was going to be coming to Greenwood, where both of you were. Mm-hmm. And you said, I want you to meet Erika. And I remember having that same experience. We've talked about it recently. Yeah. To think of, man, I just remember that first encounter so vividly. Mm-hmm. And to think now we're sitting here talking very confidently about what the answer can be in regards to education.
Also, I would say that really, we're talking kind of vaguely, right? But the work that we were all doing was all centered around doing what's best for the student and finding creative ways to get the students the help that they needed, or the information that they needed. And when you start working on something like that together, then the chemistry starts to become something where you've got this common goal, this shared purpose, and you're all working towards it. And maybe you're thinking a little bit more creatively than people are used to, and that can bristle. Mm-hmm. But if done correctly, which I think we did really, really well for a long time, it really can be impactful. And I think we impacted a lot of students' lives, which is really awesome to think back on.
Yeah. How did you navigate? Because I know that anybody who is inspired by this episode and wants to make change in their organization are likely going to come up against similar pushback or that bristling that you described. Like, what would your advice be? How would someone navigate that based on, how you had to do that?
Good question.
I think I would say it begins by keeping those connections, the ones that get it, the ones that aren't just there to fulfill the status quo, do their time and go home, is keeping those connections and just trying to mitigate the frustration. I think so. To make it a little more clear, navigating those obstacles, I think first meant not allowing yourself to be overcome by the obstacle, because the obstacle starts to make you feel like you're alone. But keeping those connections with people that are with you, they're willing to do differently, or at least try it, helps to kind of suppress that need to, say whatever, screw this.
I would add to that, and maybe this is something that I've learned more recently, that there is this element of going rogue and being rebellious that could be subverted, right? Like, it doesn't have to be us against the system all the time. There's this level of maturity when you're trying to make change and trying to be innovative and be impactful, where you go back to the people who maybe you feel like are a roadblock and bring them into the process. Invite them into your creative conversations and get their input, get their perspective. Just because it's different than yours doesn't mean it's wrong. And they probably do know a few things that you don't know, right? And that's a lot of the work now that I'm doing is about getting wide perspective and how valuable that is. And I do think that when you're early in and you want to make change, a lot of times you forget that going rogue isn't always the answer. Sometimes you got to step back and level it up a little bit.
Yeah, and then there's an element of that is necessary. I think one of the things that we did really well was involve so many people in the process. It was kind of, we talked just about kind of how we got started, how we met, but what we started getting was momentum because from my perspective, and you can talk about yours, and we're going to come back to where you were, because I do want to talk about how we involve people, but I was reaching out on a regular basis saying, how can I help? What do you need? Do you have a student that I can assist along the way? And I was doing that regularly. The person that responded first and most often was Sarah.
I was like, yeah, help me.
I come to learn that she was just trying to get out of work. That was probably
Typical.
The primary motivation.
Smart.
She was the one reaching out, and I think she can share her perspective. I think probably what she learned very quickly is I'll go to hell and back for a student in need, because that was me. And I wanted to be that source, whether it was tutoring support, just affirmation and encouragement, whatever the case may be. I wanted to step in because not because that one was going to make the biggest difference, but I was going to learn in the process, and I wanted to learn. And I think there was something really interesting about that started to give us the opportunity to model the change we wanted to see. And so back to another thing, I think, how do you navigate the roadblocks? You model the change, right? We've heard it, be the change you want to see in the world. That's what we did in the organization. We began to innovate and try and fail, and we did it all for the student.
Right.
And it started to build momentum. So I don't know if you would agree or not, but that's how it felt for me. I'm like, you're throwing me stuff, I'm going to pick it up and run with it, because no one else was responding then.
Yeah, I mean, it's a courageous thing, right, to start modeling something that you don't see anybody else doing because you're not sure if it's acceptable or not. So, for instance, this is really, really simple example, but in this virtual world that we have right now, there's a lot of people out there enrolling students at schools of all kinds, K-12, university, whatever. It's done virtually, right? For the most part, these are phone calls and emails and text messages that are happening. And if I were to say, hey, I see that you live pretty close to me, can we go grab a cup of coffee and talk about your educational journey? I mean, most people right now would be like, what? You can't meet with the student, not face to face. But think about that. That's crazy. That's wild. That would be so taboo. So if you're going to try something as simple as that, you kind of look around, you're like, nobody else is doing this. Is it not okay? So to do it, even that simple thing to say, I'm going to meet the student for coffee, it takes a ton of courage. And that's what Adam is talking about. He's like, well, I'm just going to do these things. I'm going to go visit that student at their house. I'm going to go help that student figure out how to connect their printer to their computer and use copy and paste and all the things that, some people need help with, and it's better in person. And then the next person who's wondering, can I go have coffee with a student, looks around and says, well, Adam does, so I think I can. And that's when the change starts to occur, because like you said, you're modeling. this behavior.
But you said it a little bit ago, it was all hinged on doing what's right by the student,
Right.
not what's easy.
Right.
Because what would be easy would be for me to send them a screen video of here's how you hook up your computer or whatever the case may be. And there has to be caution around this. And it should be said that there was caution, right? I mean, we weren't just running wherever we wanted in the process, but there was also a little bit of a reckless abandon to it. And I want to use one example of a student that kind of to illustrate your point, that people started going, wait, we can do that? I had a student who was struggling in his program. He was bordering an F. He was really, really low D at that point, had 2 weeks left to recover the course. And so I told him, his name was Kevin, and I told him, I said, listen, here's the deal, Kevin. You get a B in this class, I will personally drive to where you are and give you a high five. And he goes, no, you won't. I said, yes, I will. I promise. He goes, you're serious? I said, I'm dead serious. That sucker pulled it off. He got a B plus. I remember I went to my supervisor at the time and said, I need this next Friday off. I took a vacation day and I drove 2 states away to give this guy a high five. I had lunch with him. And that kind of stuff that was one student, right? No other student really knew that. But it was that kind of action that said, love shows up, right? That's how I want to say it. Love shows up. I love these students because I saw myself in them. And I didn't want them to struggle. I didn't want them to feel isolated and alone. And so that was my mentality. Love shows up. And so I would get in the car and I would go connect with these students and did it, of course, in ways that made sense. The university was protected, that I was protected. But we started doing this, and I think people thought exactly what you said. Wait, we can do that? And then it started happening on a regular basis, and it started to create change. So I think back to navigating the challenges, some of them we had to run over, and there's some of that I'd look back and say I would do some of those things a little bit differently. It's probably no secret listening to just our podcast and our conversation. I'm not afraid of confrontation. I don't seek it, but at the same time, I'll run through it if need be. And I think sometimes that's necessary. You talked about the courage. Sometimes the courage needs to be someone willing to say, that's about you, and that needs to change. And that was a part of the journey as well, which made it difficult internally, but so rewarding externally because we just kept going and we were having success.
Yeah.
And as a somewhat of an outsider from that perspective, I remember those times and just seeing how you guys were able to bring people together and bring people in those conversations, which was so, at least at the time, unexpected and really gave voice. You started to find out there were more and more and more people who really wanted to do those types of things and could see it happening and wanting to be a part of that, movement. And that was really, really incredible.
Yeah. And that was kind of after a transition had taken place where all of that work started to occur, where our roles changed slightly from feeling like one spot of enrollment or academic advisor or student success to Adam was given permission to create a student success team that were focused on doing some new and innovative and creative things. And I don't know how much we're allowed to say, but we really wanted you on that team, Erika, but
it didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
We were told no.
Anyway,
I'll say it. We were told no.
Anyways, this team evolved and it became really focused on the strategy of overall for the entire university student success. And then we started this whole new life almost at the organization.
And it's worth telling that, it's kind of like watching a movie. You gotta tell the messy parts too. Like movies leave some of that stuff out, right? And the messy part of that is it wasn't like I was some golden child and was given the opportunity to build a team. In fact, it was the opposite of that. There was quite a bit of opposition in that process because enrollment numbers at the time weren't supporting new initiatives, new growth. And so we took a data perspective, and we had done 6 months worth of research up to the team's proposal. That research is really what allowed us the contrast to see the actual issue. And so what we did in research is decided that if we're going to really understand student retention, we should stop studying those who stayed. We should study those who left. So we put together a small team of volunteers, and this was done above their jobs, to reach out to students within the last 6 months who had left the institution. And we asked one question: how could we have served you better? That was it. Some of those we did via phone, email, and then I just hit the street. I started knocking on doors. I had some great conversations, and we summed all that data up. We reached out to and made contact with over 600 students, and we summed that data up. And the essence of that data said it was the easiest thing for me to cut. When challenges came in my life, it was the easiest thing to cut because I didn't know really anyone there.
And they didn't
know me. And it's really interesting because that aligns perfectly with the research that's coming out of institutions like Ruffalo Noel Levitt's. They're saying that community and connection is the key to student success and retention. And so then it was like, oh, we got to build a team so that we can be really more of the more personal side, because this team wasn't going to be building schedules. They weren't going to be tracking academic progress. It was just going to be about how are you doing? What are you up against? Right. And so we built that team. And then about 6 months into that came to a new discovery while we were in Fort Wayne doing some learning.
Yeah. So first I want to backtrack to something that you were saying, and it reminded me of something Erika said in one of the podcasts that I've listened to of the two of you. And that is this idea of the student not being known. And you had made this comment that, that when you're not missed, right? The sense of belonging when you're not missed. So, these students, they know no one's going to miss them if they leave. No one actually realizes that they have left the class or the course or the program, right? And that's a big deal. So what Adam was saying is correct. We go into this process of starting to seek input and perspective from various departments and divisions to figure out how can we better know the student. That's what we're trying to solve, is how can the student know that they are known, and how do you do that, especially in a virtual space? We started going around and talking with folks and getting some input, and that really became an entire monster all by itself.
It really did, and a good point to note. We're doing a 2-part series. We're going to stay with Sarah. We're nearing our halfway point, and we'll transition to learn more about what Sarah's doing here in 5 or 7 minutes or so. But
that's not enough time.
It's not enough time, is it? But to put a little bow on that and get back. I know, Erika, you had some questions just of the two of us, but we started going out and asking in the satellite locations, how do we solve this? We started putting workshops together of how do you solve student withdrawal, permanent withdrawal? And in one of our gatherings that happened to be in Fort Wayne, what we kept hearing was they wanted to interact with other employees more, because they didn't feel like they understood their job. And it's in that moment that it really dawned on us. And I did something then that was probably the most brash or bold thing I've done professionally at the time. I made a statement at the beginning of that workshop. Whatever you share with us today, we're going to come back from lunch with a decision, and we're going to do something about it. And we came back, and it was at that lunch. I'll never forget. It was lunch, it was coffee. And we went to Starbucks, and we sat there realizing that the students are saying we didn't know anybody. They didn't know us. But it was in that moment, that workshop, we realized our coworkers don't know each other.
They're saying the same thing. Yeah.
They don't know each other. And that's when that statement, the quote, the one you butchered, that episode.
And I will again.
Yeah. That's when we realized
you cannot offer that which you first don't possess.
That's it. That's the one.
That was it. You cannot pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
If we were ever going to solve the connection between the institution and the student, we had to solve the connection within the institution. And so that's what we did. We implemented workshops for that very purpose.
Yeah.
We hosted so many workshops and started building employee engagement and community.
Yeah.
And what occurred after that was so natural.
About 400 employees, would you say? About 400 employees we put through sessions where they sat in a room with people from other departments and divisions, and we were talking about real things like permanent withdrawals and enrolling students, but it was the Trojan horse, right? We were just getting them in the room, yes, to share information and learn from each other. But what they were doing was connecting with each other and getting to know one another and building trust and building this magic, these magical moments that then become later on. It's this fuel that fuels the fire for later on when they are at their desk and they're trying to solve something. They're like, I just met Erika in that workshop. I'm going to call her up. Never would have called her up a week ago because I'd never met her.
Right.
I probably think she's evil because she's in this department that I think might be evil, right? But no one's evil, and we all care about the student, and we all have this common thing, and we're real people, we're humans, and it was really, really amazing to watch unfold all these people realizing that, gosh, we all have this thing in common. We just don't know each other.
Yeah. What I think that we've talked about here for the last 30 minutes-ish is really that foundation of starting to build a human-focused organization. So, kind of things I've heard, start small, find your people, talk to each other, start small, those little things. You talk about, going to meet up with a student for coffee, like very inconsequential type things. I mean, what's the worst that you could have happened? You get there, that student's not there, they didn't show up. Okay, so you go back to the office.
That happened.
Sure it did. But start small. You took a data-driven approach to it. You dug into that, and then started to break down those silos just by getting people to share and talk with each other. Those all seem very doable.
Yeah, and I would say that's for those sitting in the seats, because that's where we were. That's what we did, and we began to lead by example, and then gather data. This is important, right? Yeah. So if you're listening and you're going, I think I can do that. I've got a small group that I connect with. Don't just go with your emotion. Don't just go with your gut. Gather data and say, this is what's happening because of these things. That's what we did. And we were able to garner executive sponsorship. That's why the team was created. And then we had momentum. But the innovation that came from those participating in the workshops. And I got a lot of credit for that innovation. But the reality is it came from those who were interacting and going, if I'd have known that was a problem, I would have stopped doing it. And then efficiencies would happen. And it was really special. But I think for the leader, if you're a leader listening to this and you're going, I want something like that to take place in my organization, my encouragement to you is to consider the troublemaker. I think Sarah would be the first to admit, you said square peg in a round hole. Yeah, that was probably true for all of that first small group. But we were flagged troublemakers, and the troublemaker is the one who cares enough to say something. And I think engaging them and finding out, what do you see? What are you wondering that we should be considering? That's a good place to start, and a nice practical step for the leaders, those in position to make change. It's a nice practical step for them to take. Well, you ready to talk about you?
Sure. We just rolling right into that.
No, I think yeah, we're gonna get into that, but it's been good to reminisce a little bit.
Yeah.
Really, we could spend 4 hours talking about all the unique stories. There were so many, but thank you for reminiscing a little bit, and we'll
Absolutely.
get back to talking about what you're doing.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us here at the Leading Adam podcast. We hope you found inspiration and hope to see you again next time. Leave us a comment on YouTube, or if you have an idea for a future episode, let us know that too. You can connect with us at 240solutions.com. Thanks, and we hope to see you again next time.